Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ma'am, and good morning, everyone. Let us introduce our group. My name is Frista Risandi, and there are my friends, Najah, Puspita, Banapsaj, and Jihan Fauziah. Now we will explain about the journal. The title is The Impact of Industrial Revolution Towards Children in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. Next slide. The first abstract. This study deals with the impact of Industrial Revolution toward children as reflected in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. The aims of this study is to find out the negative impacts of Industrial Revolution towards children and how these negative impacts affect children. The study uses qualitative research method and sociology theory of literature in analysis. The data relates to the description of the negative impact of Industrial Revolution and how this negative impact of Industrial Revolution affect children as portrayed in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. The result of this analysis show that there are two negative impacts of the Industrial Revolution towards children in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, namely poverty and child labor. Meanwhile, how do this negative impact of the Industrial Revolution affect children? There are four types. There are children recruitment as criminal, baby farming, children apprentice, and the last, physical abuse towards children. Next slide. Will present by Najah, Puspita, Banapsaj.
Okay, thank you, Frista. This is the part of introduction. There are several points in this part. The first is definition of literature. Literature is a reflection of the world and human life with its social environment, where the main criterion as the basis for literary work is truth about what the reader wants to convey. It's said by Pradopo. Literature is the result of the author's imagination about the description of human life in society that is transformed into a fictional form and present it to public. Literature is a way for the writer to convey his thoughts, experiences, feelings, and ideas about a reality or the real picture around him. Literature relates society. Literature is an integral part of society and has a profound effect on the way people think. Through this process, literary enthusiasts will more quickly understand the condition and social life around the writer because literature represents the people and society, culture and tradition, even the social aspect and social problems that occur in society and will serve as documents at that time. So, literature and human life are difficult to separate. The second is an approach is needed in understanding humans and society and social phenomena. So, sociology is the scientific study of society and human behavior. It's said by Hans Lin. The third is theme of Oliver Twist novel. Novels can be stories about technology, sexual freedom, global warfare, romance, fiction, real life, family, horror, social, anxiety, or all about phenomena that occur in society. The same case happens in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist, which was published in 1838 with the background of the Industrial Revolution that occurred in the Victorian period. So, Oliver Twist is a story that describes the poor living condition of children in England in the Victorian era with the background of the Industrial Revolution who received unfair treatment from the social environments. Next slide. Okay, the next slide is explanation about Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution is the process of change from an agrarian and handicraft economy to one dominated by industry and machine manufacturing. It is the same as the Victorian era against the backdrop of the Industrial Revolution as technological and economic advances gain momentum with the development of steam-powered ships, rails, and later in that century the development of internal combustion engines and the development of electric power. The next is the impact of the Industrial Revolution, which emphasized the negative effect towards the lower classes or workers and forced them to commit violation such as crimes that harm themselves and others. The working class clearly suffered from the Industrial Revolution. They had to live in poor and crowded houses with the threat of disease. Most of them didn't have a lot to eat and many starved to death. Whole families had to work and members were separated. And the last is the reason for choosing Oliver Twist as the object of study. Oliver Twist by Dickens shows how hard life can be an orphan must survive in the era of the Industrial Revolution that threatened him the future goals with the flow time and social development, new social demands and problems as industry negative impact revolution. In this study, the authors analyzed negative impact of the industrial revolution toward children and how this is negative impact affect children in Charles Oliver Twist by Dickens. Next slide. Okay, the next material will be delivered by Jihan Fauziah.
Okay, thank you, Najah. The next material is theoretical framework. There are some relevant theories which are used in study. They are sociology of literature, poverty, child labor, and exploitation. The first is sociology of literature. Sociology of literature is a study or approach in the form of an objective and scientific study human in society, institution, or social relationship, phenomena, social aspect, and process. The next, poverty. Poverty as a condition that does not support or is an inability to meet basic needs such as food, clothing, shelter, education, and health.
Kalau pakai wifi sini tuh pasti deh. Keluar dong.
The next, child labor. Child labor is a term for employing young children. According to it, rich factor owners approach Paris leader with the idea of them taking in children and feeding, housing, and providing for those children in exchange for the children work in their factories. And the last, exploitation. Exploitation is the arbitrary or excessive use of a person with the aim of personal or group interest without considering justice and compensation for the welfare of victims who are exploited. The next theoretical frameworks by Frista, Yustika, Risandi.
Okay, thank you, Jihan Fauziah. Now, still theoretical frameworks. The first is the recruitment of children as criminals. According to Miller 2016, some of the poorer children in Victoria find that criminal activities make their lives easier. Stealing food from food truck and running fast is often the only way to get food. These children were asked to steal tissues, money, jewelry, and more. If they don't steal many things, they will be punished by the leader, such as letting them sleep without eating and treating them. The second, baby farming. Baby farming in the area of the Industrial Revolution, the number of orphans also increased because many parents died due to accident in factories, so the orphans taken to Paris houses, and many women who work in factories had to leave their babies to be cared for. And according to Wine 2021, a baby farmer is someone who was purely interested in making money out of taking in these children. Baby farming was a very famous business at the time. The nannies were paid by they didn't do their job well. They starved the babies, fortune them, and ignore them. Next slide. Okay, the third, children apprentices. Children apprentices, they were many orphanages to accommodate children who were abandoned by their parent because they died or were abandoned because they were unable to care for them. Most of the children will be sent to workhouse to work there when they were 10 years old, and some of them were also offered at low prices to become apprentices or slaves to the capitalist class or the those who run shops. Humphreys says, under such pressures, paupers apprenticeship never passport into the better trades may have become way to dispose of burdensome children, means by which they were hurriedly unshared into the labor market. And then the last, physical abuse. It is a form of physical or mental abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, or neglect of children. Most physical abuse occur in the child's own home, orphanage, at school, or in the environment where the child interacts. According to U.S. Department of Health and Human Service Administration for Children and Families Administration on Children, Youth and Families Children's Bureau, 2019, physical abuse is generally defined as any non-accidental physical injury to the child and can include striking, kicking, burning, or beating the child, or any action that result in a physical impairment of the child. Next slide. Now, research design of the journal. In this study, the writer applied a qualitative descriptive method and library research process based on sociology approach. It means that by using qualitative descriptive method, the writer tries to describe and interpret the data related to the subject in order to get deep data and information about the object by giving detailed data information and solve the problem in the study. The data expressed as terms, dialogues, phrases, and sentences. The statement of the problems of the study are formulated as below, collecting some book that relate with sociology, but the library and internet research. Finding and marking the data explain how this negative impact of industrial revolution affect children as portrayed in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. Next slide. Will present by Najah.
Okay, this part of discussion in this journal, this study deals with the negative impact of industrial revolution toward children as reflected in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. The data were taken from the text in the novel and the writer applied qualitative descriptive and library research, which supported the analyzing of this novel. Next slide. Yeah, the negative impact of industrial revolution. There are two negative impacts of the Industrial Revolution reflected in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist toward children, namely poverty and child labor. The first is poverty. The description of poverty in this novel was characterized by family low incomes, food shortage, poor living condition, and poor health. Poor living conditions are part of poverty. Families who have a lot of children experience difficulty to meet their needs, so that most of these children will be neglected and even die on the streets. The situation of hunger and destitution. Due to all the social problems associated with industrial poverty, the government tries to pass a new poor law in order to help the poor. Unfortunately, the poor law makes the poor suffer even more, and the situation of orphans were left starved and neglect. Poor health. The growth of children, both physically and mentally, is very influential on the future of these children. But unfortunately, in the Victorian era, with the background of the Industrial Revolution, the condition of the children was very worrying. They looked thin and pale and neglected. Low family income. Low family income makes children worse off and fall into poverty. As the consequence of the low wages that they receive, they have to suffer financial problem. Next slide. The second is child labor. Children labor are involved in many different forms of work, which include risks and hazards, such as agriculture, mining, manufacture, construction, bonded children laborer, and domestic work. Manufacturers employ many children because they can be paid low wages and ordered arbitrarily. They work as outcome pickers. They spend their time from early morning until sunset. So the children in the Industrial Revolution era lost their childhood. With long working hours, food will be restricted, so many of these children starve to death at work. They work as construction worker, laying bricks. Another form of child labor is chimney sweeping. Each factory employs children as cleaners to maintain the factory environment. Next slide. Okay, the next material will be delivered or will be presented by Jihan Fauziah.
Okay, thank you, Najah. The next material is the effect of the negative impacts of Industrial Revolution affect children in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. Based on the previous explanation regarding the negative impact of the Industrial Revolution, there are two types, namely poverty and child labor. Both of these impacts certainly affect the children, as the effect is that they are exploited by the way they are recruited as criminal, baby farming, child apprenticeship, and physical abuse. The next slide. The next is children recruitment as criminal. During the Industrial Revolution era, many children live on poor living conditions. They live on the street. Most of the street children are orphans or neglected children. The existence of many street children is caused by poverty. This situation give a chance for people who have authority in order to recruit those of children as pickpocket or thief. The next, baby farming. Baby farming during Industrial Revolution era, baby farming had become a very well-known business. The condition of those children when they are farmed out is also miserable. Some of them are dead due to bad treatment and the carelessness of baby farmer. Baby farming can be considered as children exploitation because they utilize babies as their money farm. They are paid by their parents and orphanage, but they never done their duty very well. They just think about themselves and take advantage of those babies. The next, child apprentices. Child apprentices, there were many children who worked as apprentices during Industrial Revolution era. The word apprentices means a person who is under an obligation to work for his master for a period of time for which he receives his master instruction for his profession, art, or occupation. And the last, physical abuse. Physical abuse is a form of exploitation as a result of the impact of poverty and child labor, where they experience physical abuse in their environment, both in the workplace, in orphanage, and others. Okay, conclusion presented by Frista, Yustika, Risandi.
Okay, now we are in the last part about conclusion. After analyzing the data, the writer draws conclusion and author present the conclusion of the overall analysis. Based on the previous data analysis, the writer came to the following conclusion. There are two negative impacts of the Industrial Revolution towards children reflected in Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. The first, poverty was characterized by low incomes, food shortage, poor living condition, and poor health. And then the second, child labor is characterized by most children at the time working as farmer, chimney sweeper, picking oakum, shopkeepers, construction workers, and many factories prefer to employ children because they can be paid lower wages even if they work very long hours, so that children lost their childhood. Regarding the negative impact of the Industrial Revolution, there are two types, namely poverty and child labor. Next slide. Okay, that's all our explanation about the journal. Thank you for attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.